Assalamu alaikum, folks. I hope you are doing well. A bit of a different chart today. I've overlaid the global liquidity index against the price of Bitcoin to point out the following. It does seem, at least since the launch of the ETFs, that there is a correlation here, although with a lag. So when the liquidity is rising, you can expect Bitcoin to rise, although not immediately, but with a lag of a few weeks. And it is noteworthy that since the start of the year, liquidity has been rising. And yet we've basically just been chopping sideways. So liquidity is that yellow line, and the price of Bitcoin is in blue. And we've basically been chopping sideways since the start of the year. Actually, I would say for the last 3 months, we've basically been at the same level we have been with regards to the price of Bitcoin. So that is a promising way to view things. That is, if the liquidity picture continues to be robust and is increasing globally, then we should see a rebound based on previous patterns for the price of Bitcoin. And the bigger the base, the bigger the break, as they say. So the longer the period of consolidation, the more dramatic the move is for an asset, up or down. And let's hope it is up. And certainly, the metrics that we're looking at suggest that the bull market is not over yet. I've gone over a few of those metrics on this live before. We'll go over my favorite one in this live. By the way, if you enjoy these lives, do leave a like. I would really appreciate that. And if you haven't joined our community yet, make sure to do so. Looking at the indices today, they ended today in the green, with with the exception to the Russell, which tracks small cap stocks. So Dow Jones, Nasdaq, and S&P were basically all in the green, but only by a smidge, just like yesterday. So barely in the green for those indices. We did get a bit of a pullback on the yield on the 10-year Treasury, which is good for risk assets. The dollar index is basically unchanged, a bit stronger, up 0.13% in the last 24 hours. The VIX index is also quite flat. It is down 0.52%. That's the measure of volatility in the markets. Tesla continues to rebound from the lows it saw last week, which put it at around 320. Today it's at 360. Bitcoin and Iron were flat. These are Bitcoin miners. Intel pulled back from yesterday's big jump that it got on the heels of news that TSM and Broadcom may end up owning a bunch of the business. Gold continues to beast higher. If we look year to date, it has been one of the best performing assets. We started the year at 2,600. We're now at 2,900, and hopefully this is a good indication as to what is to come for Bitcoin, because Bitcoin, I do believe, the most probable and meritful use of Bitcoin is an alternative to gold, a superior form of gold. And I do expect a lot of flows from gold ETFs eventually to Bitcoin ETFs. We saw that last year, and I think that will continue this year as well. Bitcoin is at 96,000, Doge is at 25 cents, and Solana is at 168. Trump, the official Trump token, is at 16. Recall, this really started the chaos in crypto, where focus was on AI tokens, and then all of a sudden, focus shifted dramatically to meme tokens, led by Trump's official token, and had a high of close to 45 rather, and it's now back at 16. Now, looking at the anticipated Fed minutes that were released today, it does appear that the Fed is really focused on inflation a lot more than employment. It's kind of not worried about employment. It does see that the economic outlook is stable and that the real risk is in inflation creeping up again. And that's why it needs to take a cautious approach with regards to rate cuts. That is, I think, understandable. And I think the market is transitioning to a phase where macro is not front and center, or monetary policy at least is not front and center, and rather the fundamentals of the different assets that are being traded is what is front and center. And that's really a great environment for a stock picker. So the I think that the environment right now is an environment that is good for those who know how to find, robust companies with strong cash flows, strong outlooks, and those investors will be rewarded, I think, in this upcoming period. If we look at the MVRV Z score for Bitcoin, just to confirm that we haven't hit the top already. In previous cycles, the top was between 7 and 9, let's say. That really marked the top for that cycle. In this cycle, we've really only seen an MVRVZ score of 3, not much more than that. We're currently back close to 2. An MVRVZ score of 0, that's when you really want to start buying. Right now at 2, we're certainly not at the top of the Bitcoin cycle, if history is any guide. Now, we're also not at extreme bargain levels either, but it is nice to know that at least if taking this metric as our guide, there's still some meat left in the bone on this bull cycle. The altcoin season right now or the altcoin, whether or not we are in altcoin season, we had a very brief altcoin season in basically December of last year, 2024, and this was extremely short-lived. And all of a sudden, we're at 43 right now. The higher this number, the more favorable it is for altcoins. And typically we say if the number is above 75 that we're in altcoin season. We're certainly not in altcoin season right now at 43. And if we do get an altcoin season, again, it will probably be very short-lived, is my expectation. And it'll be very discerning with regards to which cryptos actually benefit. And so, my 2 cents is that you want to make sure to trim when you get a chance to trim on the altcoins that you are invested in. In terms of some sort of secular trends that are, if we zoom out here and we look at the fundamentals for something like Bitcoin, I think this year is really going to be the year that kicks off the race for strategic Bitcoin reserves between sovereigns and corporations. And that's going to be extremely bullish for Bitcoin. That's why I maintain my price target for Bitcoin of 200,000 for the next 12 months. I do believe that we'll get there. And it's going to be primarily because of this Bitcoin reserve dynamic that's playing out between corporations and sovereigns. We're just getting started here. I'll give you Exhibit A here. Texas introduces a new strategic Bitcoin reserve bill. Hasn't been passed yet, but the bill has been introduced. That's one step in the right direction. And then if you look at the details of the bill, it does mention that the state would be buying at least 500 billion every year. So Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency purchased using money in the reserve or received by the reserve must have an average market capitalization of at least 500 billion over the most recent 12-month period. I'm sorry. So not every year, but within a 12-month period, they're going to be buying 500 billion worth of Bitcoin if this bill passes. And so that is extremely bullish for Bitcoin. And that's just one state. And there's at least 20 states that have different strategic Bitcoin reserve bills. And I believe that you're going to see more states introduce them, and you're going to see more countries introduce similar bills in the future. And once a big country has a strategic Bitcoin reserve, you better believe that's going to kick off a race between other countries to establish their own Bitcoin reserves, because no one wants to be the last to establish their reserve, because that means that they're going to pay higher and higher prices for their Bitcoins versus the people that established their reserves earlier. Now, the topic of today that I wanted to look into was the announcement by Microsoft that basically it reached a breakthrough in quantum computing, introduced its Majorana chip. It's the first quantum processing unit built on topological core. Basically, what they're saying is this is a step in the direction of stability for quantum computing and being able to actually use it in a practical way. The CEO, Satya Nadella, mentions, "We believe this breakthrough will allow us to create a truly meaningful quantum computer, not in decades, as some have predicted, but in years." Now, the question here is that, will this threaten the Bitcoin network? Or will it threaten all encryption, really? And specifically, will it threaten the encryption in the Bitcoin network? Now, from the takes that I've read about this is still years away in terms of actually having a chance at threatening the Bitcoin network in its current form. And that being said, the Bitcoin network is always in a state of development, and there is ample time for the Bitcoin network to adapt to these new threats before they become actual threats to the network. So I wouldn't necessarily sell everything. I understand that some people may be concerned by this announcement, but I do think that whenever something like this happens, you want to err on the side of the people who are not panicking. So the commenters that are not panicked are the ones that you want to have a bias towards. Anyone who's panicked is the ones that you typically want to stay away from. The reason for this is that, yes, sometimes threats appear that are quite legitimate, but every time something like this happens, you have to remember that the other side, the counterparty, the party being threatened, is not in a static state, and so they will respond and adapt to the threats that are being posed by the new developments. And so, in the context of Bitcoin, you can be sure that there are a lot of vested interests in the Bitcoin network, and there will be a lot of attention paid to new developments in quantum computing and the risks that they pose on the Bitcoin network. And the Bitcoin network will adapt to make itself resistant to these new threats. And they do have years of time to prepare for this. So with that being said, let's take some questions. Hey, nice to see you, Rashad. Thank you for coming and protecting us from spam comments. Assalamu alaikum, which gold ETF? I did mention BAR, B-A-R, in a previous slide. Check it out. Salam, Jamshed. Salam, Hussam. Nice to see you now that you're part of the community. Yes, inshallah, I did see that in our lounge today on Discord, the request to discuss zakat, and inshallah, we will do that. I lived in the UK and can't buy Bitcoin ETFs, so I bought Mister instead. Is that advisable? Well, Mister's business model is based on interest-bearing debt, so that's not something that I necessarily feel comfortable with. Any input on Solana? Well, I mentioned that previous price targets for Solana that were 1,000 plus didn't really make sense to me. But I do think that there will be a recovery here. We're at 170, I believe. Yeah, 168.90. I do think that, and I mentioned this on the live before. Price target for me in next 12 months probably 300. If you see a 3 handle on Solana, I would sell. Not investment advice, just telling you what I would do. Do you see a Bitcoin dip soon? And do you see yourself buying some if there's? I do see myself buying some if there is. We do have a Bitcoin ETF growth portfolio, and I will certainly add to it if we get a meaningful dip. And by meaningful dip, I mean we do have buy below, sell above prices on our watch list in PIF. If you remember, do check them out. We update them regularly. But if we get a meaningful dip, and depending on what else has dipped as well, and what is presenting the best opportunity here, I do think that there is an opportunity to buy. I do think that the Bitcoin miners right now are presenting a really strong, as a proxy to Bitcoin, are presenting a strong opportunity. It's at times like these when people aren't really talking about them that you really want to think about, loading up your bags if you haven't loaded them up already. It's not when everyone's talking about them. It's when people are kind of, down on them. They're kind of questioning their theses. Why did I even buy this in the first place? That's when you want to try and snipe opportunities. And so I do think that, certain names, high quality names, I would say BitDeer being one of them, have pulled back at a high. Their highs were, 25, 26 at one point, not too long ago, but they've pulled back since to below 15. Again, this is not financial advice. I can't emphasize this enough. But, at a high close to 26, now it's at 15. I do think that this is presenting a very interesting opportunity for people that actually believe in the thesis for a company like BitDeer. Stock and crypto markets aren't connected to reality. Interesting. Why do you say that? What do you think? Jamshed asks about Microsoft's quantum computing chip, and I did comment on that. I do think where quantum computing is becoming less of a theoretical and more of a, when is it going to happen as opposed to if it's going to happen. And I am noticing the time horizons are getting pulled forward. If you'll recall, Jensen, CEO of NVIDIA, mentioned, this was something decades away. Well, now it appears that it's probably in the single digits away. And so, maybe in the future we have an even stronger view on this. BTC up, as Trump mentioned it in FLL Summit happening live now. I think there's going to be a lot of catalysts for Bitcoin in the next 12 months. Yes, I understand right now it's not looking too hot. We've been chopping for the last 3 months, same place, but we're at 96,000. I mean, we're close to, this is something that, if you asked anyone 12 months ago, hey, do you think Bitcoin will have performed well if it reaches 96,000 in the next 12 months? They'll probably tell you, yeah, of course. That's a great number. But I do think that there's going to be a lot of really juicy headlines that are catalytic for BTC in the next 12 months. And they're, I think, primarily going to revolve around the theme of Bitcoin reserve. Bitcoin reserves, corporations creating Bitcoin reserves, countries creating Bitcoin reserves, states, governments creating Bitcoin reserves. And if a competition starts heating up in that regard, there's going to be some really juicy gains, inshallah, for this crypto. Yeah, that's a good observation, catamaran. By the way, I'm very interested in catamarans, so I'll have to check out your channel. Uh, so much bullish news, yet hardly any movement. Yeah, this is true. It brings to mind the possibility of some sort of manipulation that's happening, maybe until certain reserves are established. But yeah, I can say the prospects for something like Bitcoin have never been brighter than what they are right now. So Jamshed says, Bitcoin reserves, should we all have Bitcoin reserves of our own? I mean, I'm not going to tell you what to do for your own money. I can tell you what I've done with my money, and that is I have made an allocation to Bitcoin, as PIF members know. By the way, if you'd like to follow our portfolios, do become a PIF member. Yeah, I don't think Doge is as closely tied to Elon anymore. I think that Doge has become a I think in a healthy way has separated itself from Elon Musk. And I think the same arguments you can make for Bitcoin, you can make for Dogecoin. And there's been I do think that there will be some announcements for Dogecoin that are bullish for it as well in the next 12 months. Partnerships, increased utility, other companies accepting it for payment. I think you're going to see that in the next 12 months. So, and then we have the ETF, the Dogecoin ETF, and their application for an ETF has been recognized, which is fantastic. And basically, the latest to get a decision on an ETF would be around October. I think we'll probably get a decision earlier than that because Dogecoin is just a copy of the code of Bitcoin. It's the same. It's the same code. There's just a difference with regards to the supply of Dogecoin. And so, if a Bitcoin ETF has been approved, then a Dogecoin ETF should be approved as well. And we've seen, the Bitcoin ETF decision actually went to court, and the court overruled the SEC's decision. The SEC at the time was very unfriendly and hostile to crypto. Now we have an SEC that's very friendly, the opposite. It's very friendly and welcoming and embracing of crypto, and administration that is the same. And so if a BTC ETF was established in an environment that was hostile to crypto, I think a Dogecoin ETF can be established, will be established, inshallah, in an environment that is actually crypto friendly. I low-key think iron can hit $40 eventually. Cash flows and net income out of this world. Well, I wouldn't say net income is out of this world or cash flows really. I think that it's a work in progress. They are investing heavily into getting to a point where cash flows and net income are quote out of this world, and let's hope they get there. But I do think it's a solid company with solid prospects at this point. Omar says, I think the crypto market may lose all the gains made before November 2024. It depends on the asset. I certainly don't think that Bitcoin, for example, will go back to 60,000. I mean, you could have some like black swan event, for example, that takes it there. And I don't know, the mother of all liquidations that takes it there. But for now, the fundamentals for it seem fine, so I wouldn't necessarily panic. Interesting. Pfizer made billions. Stock dropped like a rock. Perhaps I'll take a look at Pfizer again. Allocation percentages are really dictated by your target return, what are you trying to get, and the level of conviction that you have in the particular asset. If you haven't taken our course, do take that, how we answer that question. Yes, thanks for the reminder, Rashad. Please do like the video and become a PIF member if you haven't already. Make sure to take care of yourself. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum and peace be upon you all.